we are, and then trying to understand how do we minimize the negative impact to you as an individual, to the community that you are part of, and at the same time, how do I also minimize the negative impact to me as an individual and to the community that I am part of. But when you're reading something like that and you're hearing these things, what do you think about this whole situation?
So there's a couple of things. So the first thing is, actually, I'm going to give you an example. I've been going to jiu-jitsu for on and off for 7 years.
Got it.
In practice, I have a couple of belts under my belt, funny enough. And this past Wednesday, we had a guy that started practicing with us, and it's a guy. Like, there's no gender or anything, you know, it was just a guy. But I've been at this game for 7 years, and this guy just happened to be a couple inches taller than me, more powerful than me, and even though his technique really sucked, that guy was able to throw me around like I was this piece of paper, just because there are differences between biological men and women.
Physical
so
strength,
there are all of
yeah.
different things, right? Yeah. And so it'll be naive for you to not translate that into sports. You know, so that is, for me, in fact, like erasing women. What is the whole point of having women's sports if that's gonna be the case? Because there was a whole fight to make sure that women's sports were put in place so that there could be an opportunity for women to compete. Correct. Right? And to be able to celebrate, you know, being at the highest peak of your ability at that sport as a female.
It appears simple common sense, right?
Yeah.
What you just said right now. But you know that just based on what you just said right
now. 100%. We're gonna
right? I mean, what you just said right now is like you're saying, it is the end result or the struggle of women who wanted to be able to participate, knowing that you don't have the ability to participate with the other group at the same level. The right thing to do was, we are going to create this for ourselves, and we are going to participate and celebrate our accomplishments and the freedom that we have to be able to do these things today. And now, somewhere, somehow, men found a way to get in there under the idea that this is the way I see it, opposed to fighting the same fight. Though what happens with, we believe that if we don't belong here, it doesn't mean that we belong there.
Right.
We need to, just like you said before, go create your own transgender competing environment. So now it's a level playing field.
I mean, and it's leaking into every, by the way, I'm not speaking for anything but my own experience.
Correct.
You know, I've seen it over and over again. I go to a dojo where we do have newer people come in, and because I am a higher belt, we have the opportunity to train with the new guys and girls to be able to practice, and it's just been every time. It doesn't matter how much weights I lift, how much strength I have, at the end of the day, guys are just able to throw me around. It's just the way that it works. But it's also leaking into, you know, what is the name? Being named Woman of the Year. You know, there's a whole, Caitlyn Jenner.
Well,
you know, there's a whole other place.
Let's go through a list of things that you're saying, Women of the Year according to
Time Magazine.
Time Magazine, right? What about competitions like Miss Universe?
Right.
Or any of these beauty competitions that, and obviously we can mention a number of sports. We can mention
swimming, powerlifting, even
correct.
Wrestling.
So you're 100% right. I mean, but this is when you're talking about the idea of leaking into, right? But isn't this precisely though what's actually creating such a negative perception for a lot of people? And then there's a final thing that we do need to address, is the way this is being imposed or pushed into when it comes to the children though. Right? Because that's a whole different animal, and that's the one component that I'm extremely concerned about, because I don't have a problem if we're having a conversation about this as two grown-ups, you're right? But if you're gonna have a conversation with a bunch of children that is still, listen, I'm born this way, fully knowing that no matter what happened, the end result from beginning to end was going to be that end. I'll be honest with you, I've been through many situations where like I said, I met the same individual that I met when I was in first, second grade of elementary school. It still is today that same person that it appeared then that was going to be gay. Guess what? That person is gay today, right? So there was no.
He's like 100 years old today.
No surprise, you know what I mean? Or when somebody was asking, what would be the probability? 100%. There's no.
Right.
But at the same time, there's a lot of people that you know very well that you really don't have your identity fully structured, that your foundation is not solid enough. You're not in an environment that is loving, welcoming, and that you don't have clear ideas about anything. And the moment that you fall into a group that's making you feel welcome, loved, inclusive, right? That also opens the door, if not to a full transition, because I don't think you can. But at least to introduce a level of confusion, to introduce even the potential possibility of experiences that some young children really don't need to have.
Right.
And by the way, a little more sensitive to the conversation is what happened with children, and I don't mean children, I'm talking about people that are already adolescents, you know what I mean? They are willing to experiment with certain things. It's completely different than a child that is actually abused.
Right.
Right? And so.
By the way, there is a lot of that. And right now it's, yeah, I got you.
Do you understand how much of a pushback this is actually creating now from a lot of people?
So we're clear, I have 3 concerns. The first one is the LGBT community becoming the umbrella for a whole other things, meaning there's a whole transracial movement, meaning I was born Venezuelan, but now I go through a process of adjustment and now I identify as Asian. That's a thing, by the way. There is, and there is the whole by the way,
how does that reconcile with cultural appropriation?
That's like a whole other, you were opening a can of worms there, by the way. That may be a bridge that we crossed there, right? But but in addition to that, there is people that under the LGBT umbrella, they're normalizing the whole process of pedophilia. They're normalizing the whole process of even like men walking into women's spaces because it's becoming normal. It's a whole other thing. So that's one concern that I personally have. The second concern is, as we just spoke about, women's sports. And the third one, and the biggest one for me, is what's happening with the children. Look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If I were to go to high school here, in middle school, elementary school, more than likely right now, precisely for what you're saying, you feel accepted, somebody cares more about you than your own parents do because your parents discipline you and tell you no and all of that stuff. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I went to a Catholic school. I'm grateful that I was able to learn through discipline and I went into organized sports and all of those stuff because I am the person that became today. But had I not been raised in that environment, today I probably would have been a trans man, right? And so that's really scary because I cannot see my life, even though I dress like this and I present a little bit more androgynous, right? That would be the terminology. I cannot see my life as a man. I don't want to be a man. I'm very proud to be a woman. And so that would be really scary for me.
I guess it's also a matter of truly saying I'm very proud of who I am.
Period. How I present myself, everything.
Exactly.
And then the next thing is...
Which that alone, I will assume,
yes.
and based on some of the previous conversations that we had, that alone took a lot of work just to be able to not only figure it out, but also to be comfortable knowing that in many environments, in many cases, a lot of people were not as welcoming. There is a level of rejection that gets involved, even from family and work environment, and so it takes a lot just to be able to say, not only am I uncomfortable in my own skin, but I'm also proud of, you know,
and that's where the word pride comes from. It's just being extra abused. You know, it took a lot of courage to come out to my family. I had some very hard pushback when it comes to my family. I remember even when I started dating my wife, we've been together for 17 years. It wasn't an easy process to go through. And by the way, I'm grateful and I'm very proud of the relationship that we've been able to form and the people that we are right now. I'm grateful to you because you were very accepting in the environment. I'm grateful to this current platform that we're working with in financial services because also like they celebrate me as who I am, as how I present myself. But there was not such thing as trying to pray the gay away. I also wasn't influenced to become something else that I'm not. The second thing that I'm concerned about the children, because there's one thing about being influenced and the other thing is like literally teaching things that are not necessarily time appropriate for children.
For any age of any group, at any gender, at any for no reason.
You know what though? Look, you're a grown-up, right? So if you want to go pick up, and this is going to sound really old school, right? The Kama Sutra and like go through it and try a couple things with your spouse, more power to you. I don't believe that belongs in a child in a kindergarten or middle school. I don't even think high school.
So that's one of the legitimate concerns that a lot of parents have today, and a lot of people want to disqualify that concern to the point that you have politicians today saying that they know better than the parents, or that they should have the right over the parents to be able to decide what exactly is going to be taught in schools and what exactly is the information the children are going to have access to or going to be exposed to. In addition, the whole locker room, the whole idea that how are you going to protect a group at the cost of allowing the other group to become fully unprotected? How are you okay with this whole? I don't understand. Again, from a common sense perspective, you know, two different set of genitalias. Somebody is walking into to the fact that in this whole conversation though about the concept of pedophilia, right? We in many ways we literally just legalize the idea of a man being able to, or biological man, to be able to walk into an environment where you have a bunch of girls that don't know what the hell is going on. And that's got to be extremely shocking. And what's coming out today, listen, a lot of these things are going to be settled through lawsuits because that's already happening, that's already coming at the level of exposure. And again, the whole idea is that a lot of people felt that they were going to side with the needs of the transgender group, the transgender movement, at the cost and at the price of what everybody else was going to have to experience. And Lorena, my fear, my concern is that it's going to create such a pushback that people that at some point felt that things were already normalized, this especially right now that we're going into a presidential election, right? These things are going to be part of the conversation. They already are part of the conversation. You know, inevitably, the concern of parents, the concern of people that are saying, "Listen, this is way too much. I'm done with it. I can be as accepting as I want to be, but I'm not okay with this level of exposure and the way." And so, for me, you know what I mean, just having the idea of the conversation, I'm doing it for two reasons, though. One of them is I do have a legitimate concern of things that can actually go into days of, again, violence and discrimination. Is so divisive that it's gonna.
Can I tell you that I'm grateful? Look, the whole Stonewall gay rights, gay movement, I'm super grateful for what happened there. I would not be able to have the life that I have now, where I can freely walk, I can hug my wife in the middle of the street, you know, well, not in the middle that causes accidents, but you know what I mean? I can be who I am and there's not a problem. I can actually get married. By the way, in the whole marriage thing. Like, I don't want to go into a Catholic church and get married. I just want to get married and have the same rights that you
The
do.
same amount of rights,
I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
make sure
yeah.
that when I die, my
Correct.
wife gets my money, not my family. I love my family, but my
Correct.
wife is the person that I decided to share a life with, right?
Correct.
If I end up at a hospital, something happened to me, I want my wife to be able to have
The
the
one that has the right to make the decision.
right. So I want the
especially,
protection
yeah.
under the law.
Correct.
I don't want to infringe upon
No
your
issues with that.
religious belief.
Correct.
And in your church to tell your priest to marry me, that's not okay. Just as it shouldn't be okay for you to tell me that my relationship with my wife is different than yours.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So it's like, that's where I stand. And I'm grateful for all of those sacrifices that were made back then. And I want to make it very clear. My biggest concern is that we are going to have to go back to that because the umbrella of LGBT is putting a bunch of people in there that shouldn't be there. I can tell you that the big percentage of the, let's call it legit LGBT community actually feels the way. You know, the moment the Q started presenting itself into the whole equation in 2016, it just threw everybody
Who controls
for
that though? This is not an organized. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just this is
Yeah.
something. It's a snowball effect, and keeps just things. This is not. Listen, the Catholic Church has the Pope. You know what I mean? Government has a president. You know what I mean? We have a constitution. We have the.
We have Lady Gaga. No, just kidding.
That's my point. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You really. Is that maybe even a recommendation for the community itself? You need to organize, but not just as a bunch of people that gather somewhere. Somewhere you need to organize to the point that you become institutionalized, so that you can actually start creating a framework that will be even a better way to protect.
You're
or
thinking
not-
alongside of hierarchies?
but shouldn't you though? Shouldn't you? Is there any other way to prevent it? Because otherwise, listen, it's just a matter of time
That's funny.
where the B has nothing to do with bisexual, but bestiality.
Oh,
I
God.
mean, like where do you stop with the whole thing if you don't have a way to say, okay, here's our core values. Here's what we are fighting for. Here are the things that we are against. Here are the things that we respect. This is really what defines our community. Because if you're just going to keep adding more and more things, then what is the community? If you are everything, you cannot be everything. You know that.
Yeah.
You cannot be everything to everyone. You're at some point, if you're everything, then you're nothing. Because there's nothing that defines you as anything as specific. And then in addition to that, from my side of it, right? Then the concern is it becomes so confusing that I don't know what part of it to
just wanna
support,
shut it down.
what part of it I need to respect it.
Yeah.
And then at some point everybody just goes like, forget with the whole thing. You know what? I had enough. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to understand it. I don't want to have the need to process any of these things. That's your issue. You deal with it. Don't come near me. That's not a good thing.
Right.
And I hate to tell you this.
we'll go
my
back to
fear-
pre-1969,
Exactly.
yeah.
And then, you know, all these stupid terms, the whole turf, you know, people that are hostile to transgender people, the term itself is actually stupid. If I don't agree, like the whole idea of using things like that is, if I don't agree with you, I don't need to call you a name. I just don't agree with you. The same way that if you're a Democrat, you don't have to agree with a Republican but at some point, you have to be respectful of what the other opinion is because it's probably trying to tell you something. Listen, I want to give you last words. I want to see if there's anything else that from your end you wanted to say or introduce about it before I tell you what my closing hope and expectations.
So there are
for
two
this.
camps that I'm speaking to here.
Yeah.
The first one is the LGBT community.